This is a webinar on competence-oriented learning. Within the InHerit project, we base our development work on ideas on competence-oriented learning. We are focusing on training heritage interpreters, either heritage interpretative guides, site managers, or interpretative copywriters. And in training these people, we are basing ourselves on a competence-oriented learning model, which I will present right now. In the model you are seeing right now, you see a lot of components, and I will go through it systematically, and I will start at the bottom quadrant of this model. There you see the words knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and they are basically the components people associate with competence. But in the InHerit project, we have also included the upper segment or quadrant of this circle, saying that a competence is not only a mixture of skills, knowledge, and attitudes, but it's also a mix of the ability to act in a particular context at a particular level of quality. And people that are engaged in competence-oriented learning, they go through a mix of experiences that trigger this process of competence acquisition. So they are invited to act in a particular context, and they get feedback on the level of quality they are showing in their performance, and through that they become aware of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need to have for that. And so alternately, they either add to their knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or to their ability to actually do something with it in practice. This whole process in this model is visualized as something circular, in which the needs and goals mentioned in the upper part of the circle are pushing the learning process, while the challenges and the opportunities are pulling the process. And that, as a consequence, leads to, in the bottom part of the circle, to a greater potential of what is mentioned in the upper part of the actual performance of the participants. So that's basically the idea of competence-oriented learning, and I will now try to explain it more in words. So competence-oriented learning basically is contextualized learning. That means that the learning process takes place in the situation in which the actual application of the learning results also has to take place. So there is no problem in the end of transferring the things that you have learned into the practice in which you have to apply it. Competence-oriented learning also basically is an active learning process. So it's not an issue of, or a matter of, absorbing knowledge provided to you by other people, but it is an active process in which you acquire knowledge through action. This action consists of an actual experience in which you explore things. Competence-oriented learning also includes always a collective part. So in order to acquire competences, it's good to check your competence with others, and to talk about it with others, and to share the learning experience, and by doing so construct your own learning process, and then eventually turn that into something personal, something that is your competence rather than a competence. And this process of personalizing competences can be established by either presenting competences as narratives in which people play a role, people the listener can identify with, so that the knowledge becomes personalized because of this identification, but it can also be personalized by turning the experience into your own personal story, and in that way personalize this competence. Competence acquisition is never competence-oriented if it is not also including a reflective part. So the learning process as such is an object of reflection, so that by acquiring competences, you also add to your ability to acquire new competences in future. So what is the essential part of competence-oriented learning? Actually, if you would have to phrase it in one sentence, I would say it is from learning to act towards acting to learn. And what does that imply for educators? In our case, we are talking about educators as the ones who are training heritage interpreters for their profession as interpreters. So what should these educators be able to do? First of all, if you want to be a competence-oriented educator, or trainer for that matter, you have to be a learner yourself. And you have to be able to demonstrate how this learning process can be organized in a valuable way that is efficient and effective to you. A competence-oriented educator has to provide learning environments. As I said before, competence-oriented learning is basically contextual learning, so these contexts have to be provided. And these contexts have to be meaningful, so they must connect to the people you are trying to help in their competence development. These contexts should allow for exploration, so it should not be something you just present to an audience of participants, but it should be something in which they can actually do something, explore something, be active, and you should also promote dialogue among the participants, so their learning process is something they share and they can accumulate and build upon each other's results. Eventually, also a basic and crucial part of the competence-oriented training repertoire is that you give feedback on the actual performance of the participants, so they get an understanding of to what extent they have really reached the level of performance they are aiming for. Competence-oriented learning, as I hope I made clear, is focusing very much on learning in an actual environment, in an actual context. This context can be either in classrooms, but it can also be provided on the spot, in the work situation, in actual life, in your work as a volunteer or wherever. And because of that, we cannot stick to traditional ways of assessing competences. We have to include something we refer to as validation. So if learning happens everywhere, then still we need something that allows us to indicate the level of competence acquired by people, and we refer to that as validation. Validation consists of a number of components, but it is always, let's say, a process of identifying the kind of competences developed, assessing to what extent they are at the right level, and recognizing these competences, and eventually transferring that into a kind of certification or a kind of, let's say, documents that provide people with a kind of proof and evidence of the fact that they have indeed acquired the sufficient level of competence. So I go through these stages. So first we have the stage of identification. In order to identify whether someone has acquired competences, we need to formulate them carefully in terms of, let's say, in which context, which actions are needed and at what level of quality, and also in terms of the knowledge, the skills and the attitudes included. Within the InHerit project, we created a reference framework in which all the competences needed for heritage interpreters are brought together. I will come back to that later in this presentation. And this reference framework can serve as a kind of background framework to which you can refer in order to describe the level of competences acquired. After you have identified the competences as they are acquired, it's important to provide the evidence of these competences, and that can be done in several ways. evidence of competences can be brought together in a portfolio. It can include products, it can include references from third parties, it can include a proof of someone's performance in a simulated context. In that sense, it can be an assessment as well. But there always must be an element of actual demonstration of your competence included. Then the assessment, as I said, is a referencing process. So the actual level of performance that the participants have reached then will have to be compared to the reference frameworks that I mentioned before. And through that, the level of performance can be related to, let's say, official levels, as, for instance, distinguished in the European Quality Framework and other systems in which educative levels are identified. And by doing so, the validation of someone's competence can also be related to the level of performance or the level of competence in other educative systems, and in this case in other education settings for heritage interpreters. Then finally there's the certification part. So that means that a legitimized body, someone who can be held accountable for doing this process of validation in a let's say in a legitimate way and in a carefully designed way, such an agency then can award you a certificate and thus prove that you indeed have reached the levels you aimed for. In the InHerit project, we use for this purpose a system named Level 5. And right now you see a slide which you probably can't read, but that's not a problem because all the information about this validation process and on how you actually do that and also on the levels that we distinguished within the InHerit project in the different positions we are training for. So that's the interpretive guide, the copywriter and the site manager. For all these levels, we created level 5 validation systems, which you can find in the publications we have developed within the project. And the slide you are seeing right now shows the web address of the InHerit project. And there, under the heading of outcomes, you can find the publications I'm referring to, named Manual and Guidelines. So I hope that this presentation has inspired you to read more about it in these presentations, and I'd like to thank you for your attention. This was the end of the first seminar.